Minecraft's Superflat world preset is intended for use in creative mode to give players a blank canvas to build on. Alternatively, you can attempt to survive in a Superflat world, which immensely restricts your access to resources, especially if you disable structure generation to remove villages from the map as well. Progression in a Superflat world challenge is mostly done through acquiring rare mob drops and using obscure game mechanics, with a lot of tedious waiting around for lucky RNG rolls. I've always wanted to try playing on a Superflat world myself, but I just don't have the patience to farm 100 zombies to get a single iron ingot, so instead I'm making a mod to speed up Superflat progression and extend it to include previously inaccessible materials and dimensions, so I can go play that instead. I want my mod to work with structures disabled, so to actually add new content, one of my only options is to add a new mob. So for that, I added pixies. These are peaceful creatures only showing up at night, and they can be hunted for pixie dust, which will be used in a number of new crafting recipes. First, I've made enriched bone meal made with pixie dust and regular bone meal. Using this on grass creates a wider flower variety than regular bone meal does, and most importantly, can create saplings. This gives early access to wood, since otherwise in structureless Superflat the only way to get saplings is by trading with a wandering villager. The enriched bone meal also makes environment-appropriate plants when used on sand, soul sand, or when used underwater. Next up, I have made a simple magic system. You use the scriptorium crafting station to make magic scrolls, which trigger different, normally RNG-dependent events like thunderstorms and wandering trader spawns. You can also use them to summon different passive or hostile mobs in the event that you get unlucky with your mob spawns. Every scroll recipe requires experience points, pixie dust, and parchment. Parchment is a new item made out of leather and can be substituted for paper. I chose to make a new item here since paper is difficult to come by at the start of Superflat. However, leather is also hard to come by in a Superflat world like this depending on your passive animal spawns, so I also added a recipe to cook rotten flesh into leather on a campfire or in a smoker. The last usage of pixie dust is in magic torches. These give the bountiful status effect when nearby, which makes mobs 10 times more likely to drop rare items. In structureless Superflat, the only way to get water is by crafting a cauldron and a bucket out of 10 iron ingots. Zombies have about a 1% chance to drop iron, meaning you normally need to kill 1,000 of them to get access to water. With the magic torch, this reduces to only 100. Of course, to make torches you need coal or charcoal. We can't get coal without fighting wither skeletons in the Nether, and we can't get charcoal without cobblestone for a furnace, so to get around those requirements I've made it so that burning logs have a chance to convert to a charcoal block when partially surrounded by other blocks. However, we also don't have access to a flint and steel, so I decided to add a simple, single-use fire starter item made with sticks and strings. If you've watched or played structureless Superflat yourself, you'll know a key point in progression is getting access to gold. This is done by converting pigs into zombie piglins via a lightning strike. I really like this concept of an overworld mob being turned into a Nether variant using lightning, and Superflat worlds are infested with slimes, so I applied this same idea to them. This gives players access to magma cream, and therefore magma blocks, by turning slimes into magma cubes. To make this not entirely pointless as a mechanic, I also made it so that using a water bottle on a magma block converts it to cobblestone, similar to using a water bottle on a dirt block to make mud. Otherwise, you're not able to get cobblestone, at least in structureless Superflat. This is still a super convoluted way of getting cobblestone though. I'd much rather have a cobblestone generator using lava and water. In order to get lava, I added a Pulverizer block, which can grind magma blocks into lava buckets. Crafting it requires cobblestone though, so you'll still need to at least convert some slimes into magma cubes before you can unlock this more efficient cobblestone generation. I've also added a bunch of other useful recipes to the Pulverizer, like turning cobblestone into gravel and gravel into sand. One of the most important usages of the Pulverizer is to get diamonds. So in base game, you can smelt down old iron or gold tools into iron or gold nuggets as a way to reclaim the resources used to create them. It's a super inefficient recipe, but it's kinda nice to have. With the Pulverizer, I've added a similar recipe, but for diamonds. You can grind down diamond tools into diamond shards, which can be crafted back into diamonds. This ends up being useful here because you can get diamond tools and armor by trading, but cannot get diamonds alone. So with all that, we've improved a lot of the waiting and also made a bunch of inaccessible items available. As an additional quality of life improvement, I've added a new tier of tools, bone tools, which go in between stone and iron. When I was playtesting the mod, I was just so tired of chopping trees by hand, and wooden tools are just awful, and iron was still too precious a resource to waste in the early game even with the magic torches, so these acted as a good compromise. Another tedious thing in Superflat is slime proofing chunks. Unlike other hostile mobs, slimes don't stop spawning during the day, so if you want them to stop showing up, you have to cover up the chunks they spawn in with half slabs. To speed up this process, I added dirt half slabs. Dirt is a very abundant resource after all, so why not make it more useful? This was really cursed though. It was really difficult to make dirt slabs grow into grass slabs and make them drop the right items when broken and stuff, but it was worth it, I guess? Maybe? So that's basically everything I wanted to do in the overworld. Now let's work on the other dimensions. First up, with access to lava through the Pulverizer, we can make obsidian and enter the Nether. However, going to the Nether, you may notice something immensely disturbing. It's not flat. So I made it flat. This does have the negative effect of making some Nether items unavailable, although I think you can still get a lot from piglin bartering or other mob drops. I'm mostly focusing on overall progression being possible in this iteration of the mod, so let me know in the comments what items might still be missing and I'll try to add ways of getting them in a future update. Anyway, we're in our nice flat Nether now, but if structures are disabled, there will be no fortresses, meaning no blaze rods or wither skeleton skulls. I implemented a simple fix to allow the player to continue progressing. If it's a structureless world, then the fortress-only enemies will just spawn in like any other mob. Similarly, with no structures being generated, there's no bastions, meaning you'll never be able to upgrade your tools to netherite. Although there's also no ancient debris spawning, so you can't even get netherite in the first place. For this, I've made piglin brutes also randomly spawn, and I've made them rarely drop netherite upgrade templates, again only if structures are disabled. Then, unlike in the overworld, I've made an exception to the standard flat homogeneous terrain generation, and I'm allowing ancient debris to spawn within the 3 layers of netherrack because, why not? You might as well be able to mine for at least one type of ore when playing Superflat Minecraft. And lastly, we have the end. How do we get there? In vanilla, you can only enter the end using end portal frames which spawn in strongholds. You cannot make these yourself. Unfortunately, we have no strongholds in this world. Even if structures are enabled, they don't spawn in on the latest versions of the game. So we have to make the portals ourselves. However, I don't want to give the player direct access to end portal frame blocks. These blocks are kind of finicky. They need to be placed facing exactly the right direction in order to work properly, which may confuse players. To avoid this, I've made a single block that generates the portal frame around itself. First, you place the portal frame generator. It shows particles where the frame will go, whose appearance will vary depending on if the placement is valid or not. Next, you place an end crystal on top and then blow it up from a safe distance and, ta-da, your own portal frame. An issue here is that these frame blocks are unbreakable by default, which kinda sucks. You'd have to be 100% certain that you never want to move a portal frame before placing it. However, I think the only reason why end portal frame blocks are unbreakable is because there's a limited number of portals in the world, so since I have now made it so that you can easily replace them, it makes sense to now allow them to be broken. Now at first, since this is a very powerful item, I wanted it to require a nether star in its crafting recipe to make it very challenging to create. But then I tested the wither fight in Superflat and it was so immensely difficult. There are unlimited slimes everywhere and it heals so quickly when killing them, and without any cover to hide behind, I was just getting killed instantly. Since the Ender Dragon is way easier to defeat than the Wither, I quickly scrapped this idea. It didn't make sense to lock a very easy boss fight behind a very difficult boss fight. So I just made the end portal frame generator recipe require 2 diamonds, an Eye of Ender, 3 obsidian, and 3 endstone. To make endstone available without first visiting the end, I added a crafting recipe which uses sandstone and end dust, which is made by pulverizing ender pearls. Now of course I can't forget to add a secondary use to end dust because one-use items are kinda lame, so I added a dye recipe. I'm kidding. I added a new potion effect, the potion of spatial instability that randomly teleports the target every few seconds while it's applied. It's entirely useless, but it's kind of fun. Now we can reach the end. But once again, it is not flat, so I made it flat. Because of this, there's no separation between the Ender Dragon Island and the Outer Islands, although I'm fine with that since you can't leave without defeating the dragon anyway, and it's not like Superflat is about exploring a unique and interesting world. I also let Chorus Fruit just grow everywhere because I don't want to shoehorn in an alternate way to get it, and it kinda livens up the place. If you leave structures enabled, you can also get end cities spawning in everywhere, which is kind of fun. Much like with the Nether, I made it so that shulkers spawn randomly if structures are disabled, since normally they are only in end cities. However, I made it so that they only show up after the Ender Dragon is defeated. This way you don't get shot at by shulkers while fighting the dragon. The end had two annoying hard-coded requirements I had to work around. The obsidian platform you spawn on is always at Y level 49, and end cities only spawn above Y level 64, so I needed to include 15 layers of end stone instead of the usual 3 for a Superflat world. For the sake of simplicity, I filled Y level 1 to 48 with bedrock because doing 48 layers of bedrock was one line shorter than doing 47 layers of air and one layer of bedrock on top of that. While this saved me like 2 seconds of work, it had the annoying consequence of breaking the end exit portal spawning. It took me forever to figure out why this was even happening. It wouldn't show up, and then once the dragon was defeated, it would spawn in buried deep underground. The issue was that the game checks if the exit portal frame exists before spawning it. And when it saw the 48 layers of bedrock, it went, yep, that's the exit portal frame alright. It's made of a bunch of bedrock after all, and nothing else could ever possibly be made of a bunch of bedrock, and then it just gave up. So that wasted like an hour of my life until I realized I just had to add in a single line of code, so that was a lot of fun. And that's it, the end. You can beat the Ender Dragon. I added one last recipe, craftable elytra using an Ender Star dropped by the Ender Dragon. This is of course inspired by the Nether Star dropped by the Wither that also lets you craft only one single high value item. Apart from the Ender Star, it's a very simple recipe using phantom membranes and string. This is probably the most unbalanced thing in the mod if you were to use it in a regular world with structure generation enabled, but oh well. Also, I'll be real with you, I'd rather scour the end for an end city to find an elytra than wait around without sleeping to have a phantom spawn. So in that sense, I think the recipe is actually kinda balanced. And with that out of the way, the mod is done. There's probably still some tweaks and bug fixing that will need doing, but for that I'll need feedback from players. If you want to help me out with that, the download link for the mod will be in the description, along with its source code if you want to see how I made it. It's only available for Java version 1.20.1 right now. I'll keep it like that until I fix everything up, and then I'll see about porting it to some other versions. Also, when I was playtesting the mod, I recorded the entire thing, so let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in seeing an edited down playthrough of that on my second channel. Not sure what the next mod video will be, maybe something with the end, maybe something more skyblocky, maybe something with automation. Even though it's something I want to make, I've been putting off making an end mod because I know that once I'm halfway finished, Mojang is going to announce the official end update, and it'll all be for nothing. Anyway, like and subscribe and whatever you feel like doing. Thanks for watching. Okay, bye.